Hi, welcome back to Raven Views the News. I'm Adam Erickson.
I'm Suzanne Ross.
And today is March 9th, 2011. And what we are viewing all over the news is anti-Islamic sentiments in the United States.
It's what's prominent right now are the congressional hearings that have been called by Peter King. I'm not exactly sure when they're going to be held. No matter what I read about it, there's no date given, but apparently they're going to be held soon to investigate the threat of to the United States of Islamic extremism or terrorism that Congressman King thinks that has infiltrated all of American Islam.
Related to that, a woman, Brigitte, Gabriel, has put together a group, a coalition, to get together and go to public places in the near future and hand out leaflets that have verses from the Quran that seem to be leading Muslims to be oppressive, to be violent, and especially towards women.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Adam and I have been talking about this for days because for us, we are smelling, sensing scapegoating of Islam going on here. And we've been trying to figure out how to express why we are suspicious of these threats, these accusations, because the reality that's out there and that Peter King and Brigitte Gabriel pointing to is that Muslims have been violent. You can't deny 9/11. You can't deny Brigitte tells her personal story of her family as a Christian family in Lebanon who were attacked by Muslims.
They were at war with, the Christians and the Muslims were at war with one another, and her dad tells her that the reason that Muslims are at war with Christians is because they hate us.
They hate us. And there is this sentiment in not all of the United States, but we see it popularized in the media, that there's something about Islam that's fundamentally at odds with what it means to be an American. And that there is this threat from within that's even scarier than a threat from Afghanistan or Iraq or Iran, that the fear that these terrorists are right in our midst and look like us and are going to the shopping malls with us, and that they're plotting and waiting for their chance to just take over and impose something, their version of
Sharia
a state,
law or
something. It's a nebulous fear, really. It's hard to understand how the Muslim population in the United States could somehow take over the United States. They're a small minority. They number in the millions,
And you see this pattern happening, recurring throughout the United States history. One of the reasons that Brigitte and the congressman say that they're doing this is because they love the United States. And so do we. I mean, there's a lot to love about the United States. One of the reasons that the United States is so great is because we have this history of being a nation of immigrants, of inviting people in and saying, you have a home here. But the problem that ends up happening is that we have this identity of being a nation of immigrants and inviting people in, but when it looks as though the immigrants might start challenging what we're about, we want to exclude them because they're a threat to our identity. And oftentimes throughout our history we see that this is a perceived threat.
Right.
That the threat is not really...
It didn't materialize. Right.
So you see this with Italians?
So my family is Italian, and I'm a product of the Italian immigration in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And at that time, Italian Catholics were coming into the country and challenging the American identity as being Christian, because Catholics weren't even viewed as Christians. And Italians were really not even viewed as part of the white race. They were some other dark-skinned race. And so my family faced a lot of prejudice, and it was hard to integrate. But one thing about the waves of immigrants that have come to this country, and my family is good evidence of that, is they're incredibly warm and loving and patriotic towards the United States. They see the United States. They come here because it's a place where they believe they will be free.
Yeah.
And free to worship, right? And the threat that these waves of immigrants seem to hold for us is really they're less real threats than they are existential threats, if you will, to our identity.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, now the thing that people will be uncomfortable with is that Italians didn't fly planes into the World Trade Center. On the other hand, back when this was happening, I'm sure that not everybody was innocent. Not all Italians were innocent in all of this, and there was gang violence. Irish immigrants, most of them were peaceful, happy to be here, wanting religious freedom. Some got involved in ghettos, in crime, in ghettos. And you see the same thing happening in Islam and for Muslims coming here. Not all Muslims are innocent. Not all Muslims are evil as well. So yes, some, just because of our human nature, I guess, some fall into acts of violence. But for the great majority of the Muslims that I know, they are here because they want to be here, because they want to be productive members in the United States. They are more patriotic than many of my other friends who have been here a long time and see things to criticize.
Yeah, and that's you're reminding me of why my scapegoating antenna goes up, and it's because when we paint Islam as a threat, and we begin to say Islam is a religion of violence, we then can rest without self-examination about our own violence. And that's one of the things that is incredibly troublesome to me.
Yeah.
Because I do love the United States and I love our country, but I think we tend to justify our own violence over and over again with much less self-critique than I think it deserves. And so when we paint Islam as violent and ignore the violence that the Islamic world is perceiving from the West or the Christian world, I mean, I even hate these labels because we're painting things in too broad a brushstroke, but that's why we don't want to paint all of Islam as violent. Right? I mean, it just backs us into this way of dividing the world into good and evil, and all of the good is where I happen to be, and all of the evil is somewhere else.
And when you possess all of the good, you're justified in getting rid of all of the evil.
Somewhere else.
Anywhere, any means in which you have to do that is justified to exclude the other. But the problem with that is that the other considers themselves to be all good as well, and so you get into this relationship of reciprocal violence where everybody is thinking themselves as being good and trying to get rid of the evil. So what's the alternative?
Yeah. I think that's one of the hardest things to understand for us, is when we think we know where evil is, when we have our enemy clearly identified, when we're the most clear about that, that's when we're most at risk of doing something that we would condemn if our enemy did it to us. Because that certainty is very comforting in a way, because it lets us know that we're good, but it also, as you say, allows us to use violence without any moral ambiguity, without any self-critique. And while we're at the same time condemning the use of violence if it's being directed at us, and that sense that our enemies are justifying their violence in the same way that we are justifying our violence is incredibly hard to see. because we're locked in this narrative of how different we are from our enemies, when the truth is that it's the similarities that we need to focus on, because that's what's allowing the violence to continue, is how alike we are in our justifications.
Yeah. So what's the great fear is good people acting violently.
Yeah.
So how do you go from good people acting violently to good people in positive relationships of, I guess, nonviolence?
Yeah. I think we just first have to stop thinking of ourselves as good, and stop dividing the world up into good and evil. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
We each of us, that dividing line of good and evil runs through each of us, right? I mean, we are all capable of doing the worst things and justifying it with, a righteous explanation. And we're also capable of incredible goodness. Each one of us, every type of person, every religious person, every ethnic group, every race.
So I think that one of the answers in this relationship with America between Muslims and non-Muslims is to get to know one another.
Yeah.
Is to open ourselves to a relationship with one another, knowing that if good and evil runs down the middle of us, that we will fail, that the other side will fail, but that we should still open ourselves up to forgiveness and being in a relationship of mutual understanding and getting to know one another.
Yeah, I think that the truly good person, the authentically good person, is open to the possibility that they might be doing something that is hurting someone wrongly, and that they're always holding that possibility in front of them. And because it's so easy to do. And that's the thing that concerns me the most about the hearings, about these, let's pick out the verses from the Quran that prove it's violent. I mean, it's too easy for us to fall into that trap of hurting people who simply want to be accepted.
Which we all want to be accepted.
Yeah.
So those are our thoughts on anti-Islamic sentiments, and we'd like to hear what you think. Thanks.
Thank you.